Hey everybody, this is Royal here with the second part of the Lunalight theory and discussion series versus the 3 decks that released in Justice Hunters with Yummy, Draco Tail, and K9. In this video, we'll specifically be talking about the fusion archetype Draco Tail and how Lunalight fares against it, going first and going second, with the available tools in the engine as well as some non-engine tools that the deck has as well. And later on in the video, I'll go over some thoughts and mindset of a replay versus Draco Tail that I showcased on a previous video of mine. But without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, as with all things in regards to Lunalight going first versus specific decks, let's talk about if this deck has any specific ways of beating Liger Dancer in archetype. The answer for that would be no. Basically, Draco Tail does have to play Liger Prevention versus this deck as well, which they can do very competently, as depending on the build, which will also affect how we interact with them going second, they can run a decent amount of non-engine in the deck profile that I have in front of you now from Vex and Yugioh, who is the owner of the Lunalight Discord. They went for a K9 build with Draco Tail, but stuff like Primite, stuff like Branded, and Dragon Maid are also viable options for engines for the deck until the Magistus cards come out, whenever they do. But yeah, I would say this has a little bit less non-engine than a deck like Yummy, for example, but I would still say it does run a decent amount. One thing to note is that Draco Tail does benefit from running Bestials, which can hurt a little bit with banishing any of the extra deck cards that you send, typically the Leo Dancer when you're setting up for the Liger. But obviously Bestials can be played around by using the on-field effect of Lunalight Kaleido to take on Leo Dancer's name if you have to play around that. The second thing, and the more important thing when it comes to Draco Tail going first, is that Femena is a very powerful card. It is a quick effect poly on either player's turn by discarding the card from the hand to the graveyard, and what it essentially would typically try to do on your turn is threaten the Altherion. The Altherion, based on the number of monsters that you use from the hand as material, can essentially target monsters on the field or in the graveyard and return them back to the hand. So it doesn't typically hurt in terms of your setup of the Perfume Dancer, but returning stuff like the Leo Dancer from the graveyard, or just returning names back from the graveyard when you're going into your poly off the Lunalight Masquerade play, or the Lunalight Wolf banish into the Liger Dancer's fusion, also are things to consider. But I think generally we have a very fair time going into it, but again, it does depend on the build that the Draco Tail player does go for, which will affect how much non-engine really that you'll be seeing out of them. But other than that, I think it's just very stock standard otherwise. But I think going second is where, as with all things, it gets a little bit more complicated, but let's get into that right now. Alright, going second, what are you typically going to be running into when a Draco Tail player sets up a board? Again, obviously, as I mentioned previously, the variant or supplementary engine that they do play will affect what their end board capabilities could be. But if we're just talking about the most stock standard end board, you're typically going to see both the Altharion and the Grammel, both of the respective in archetypal fusions, as well as the Draco Tail Flame and the Draco Tail Horn. The Draco Tail Flame is essentially a negate of a face-up spell on the field, and the Draco Tail Horn is a return to the hand, a compulsory of any sort of face-up attack position monster that is on the field. And they also both help not only in the grind game, but also provide a little bit more resource advantage by giving the Draco Tail player draws in the hand. As well as that, you're typically going to have the Draco Tail player recover the Femina for a quick effect poly on your turn as well as their turn, obviously, which they do using the effect of Draco Tail Urgula, which essentially says that you can target any of the spellcaster Draco Tail monster in the graveyard and add it to your hand by placing Urgula onto the bottom of the deck. So Altharion doesn't have a on-field effect that would have when it's already there, but the Grammel, when you chain the effect of a Draco Tail card, whether it be the Femina or either of the traps, it does also give it the ability to be used as a pop. What also that the Femina provides is not only the fusion summon, but using the dragons in the archetype, it can also function as board breakers, but also disruption as well. The pan destroy can essentially destroy one monster on the field when it's used as fusion material and sent to the graveyard. Urgula can destroy a spell or trap when that happens, and the Muller is a in archetype meteoric aggregator where it can effectively negate the effect of a face-up monster that the opponent controls. This is all essentially non-targeting, so it helps them not only break boards, but again, it can help with disrupting your plays if Femina is allowed to do its quick effect summon. You also do have the fact that they can do the Muller on field quick effect summon as well. So those are two options to be playing on your turn. They also do set up Muller on field if they do say go for a Heretic Seals play to bounce, whatever card that they feel like they need to bounce, and then they'll summon off the Muller using the Seals effect if that resolves. So I would say just generally, after you account for all those things and whatever non-engine that they may have in their grip, I would say there's good layers to the board. It's very good, strong. I like comparing Draco Tail as a sort of fusion alternative of Centurion, where the plays are pretty simple, pretty bare bones, not too much like around them, but they set up a very competent end board and can play the grind out pretty well. But there are things that Lunalight can take advantage of using their in-archetypal engine and just general non-outs. So the first things that I think we should go over are the trap cards. The trap cards, while very good, do have a bit of a flaw. see that it says essentially you can place a Draco Tail card from the graveyard or banishment onto the bottom of the deck and then draw a card. It doesn't technically say if you do upon the resolution of the first effect, so you actually have to be able to resolve the second effect to get the maximum advantage, but also just in general for it to work. So cards like Ash Blossom and Ghost Spell are very good options versus them. It also helps into cards like the Kitu, which is the Rhoda for the deck, and the Rahu Draco Tail, which is essentially Branded Fusion, Fusion Destiny for the deck. I think those, the fact that some of not that Ghost Spell is very common, but Ash Blossom is like incredibly common. Can just shut down an actual interruption is insane. Also, I think realistically, these cards don't really do too much in terms of actually interrupting us, just because we have so many pushes that unless your hand is pretty poor, I don't really see a negate of a face-up spell or like a pushback doing too much. Obviously they can chain flame to a poly, but we have ways to recover poly or to poly using other means, so it's not the end of the world, but it also just does depend when they decide to use it. The Femena is not too bad to deal with because we do have access to Dominus Impulse. So if they do set up their board, or if they do, if they're comboing off and they're trying to do another sort of poly, you can essentially chain the impulse to the second poly, which I think is pretty huge. Typically, if they're not doing it with, they'll do like Femena, then Rahu, or yeah, I think it'd be like Femena Rahu in terms of how they set that up generally. But I think another thing that sort of slightly applies to Flame is that since they're usually going to be trying to set up the Urgula returning the Femena, if they improperly chain, or if they don't, if the only thing that they summon is, if the only thing that they have for the graveyard effect is the Urgula, you can also bell that, so it doesn't return the card from the graveyard back to the hand. Also does help if you want to run stuff like DD Crow to sort of just banish the Femena altogether, just so that it isn't an interaction point that they can have on your turn. Generally, I would say the fusions are pretty negligible once you sort of like get through that. I think it's mainly the Femena and the trap cards that really are going to be the things that you have to address. You can obviously go the route of using back row removal, which I think is just generally something you should have at least 1 or 2 options in your extra deck, just because most decks can just run thrust, search, back row removal if you have to go that route. And then with this specific build, obviously you do have the K9 cards, but I think those are pretty sort of self-explanatory, where they're, at least in this build, he's usually either setting up like the K9 Ripper or the Nash Knight to do the steal, but I think that's typically fine. Other things, the Draco Tail cards, when they're setting up the trap cards or even the spell cards, they are setting them onto the field from the deck. which is used to help play around Droll, meaning Droll is pretty useless in this deck as a non-engine piece. They're usually only going like the Draco Tail Lucius to do a search or a Ketu search, but after that they're really not going to be searching, and everything else is just going to be set onto the field. So in my opinion, the best sort of non-engine that we have available to us are the Ash, the Ghost Spell, and the Dominus Impulse. Charmies don't really affect them too much. They don't do too much summons. You'll at most get like a upstart off of Brillia, and then 1 to 2 draws off of a Fuelos. Obviously, I still think these are amazing cards to run, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they are the most impactful versus Draco Tail. But, you know, the more draws you can get, the better, I suppose. Yeah. If we're going to go talking about breakers, I think breakers are okay versus this deck. I don't really see the need of running them. I think the breakers that I would probably run, if any, would be the ones that kind of like drop, or you're more using them in a sort of proactive sense to dodge the effects like the Horn or the Flame, rather than actually using them to negate or to deal with cards already on the field. So, you know, the Forbidden Droplet, the Enemy Controller, and other ones. You know, Book of Eclipse helps with dodging. I don't necessarily think, again, that you need to run these sorts of cards. I think hand trapping is just generally going to be better. But I think they're, comparatively to Yummy, I think they're much more justifiable. But again, do you really need them? I don't believe you do. It's just more so, do you want to play them or not, rather than they are an actual necessity versus the deck. And obviously, I'm, you know, going to be slightly biased in my experience. I have a lot of games versus Draco Tail, and in the many matches that I've played against Draco Tail, I have only dropped a single game. I don't think, comparatively to Yummy and K9, that the deck stands up, or I guess it's just to say it's more fair compared to those two decks. If you're wondering how I lost that one game, what they did, which I thought was pretty funny, is they I don't remember exactly how they sequenced it, but they summoned Secretarion Dragon, because I believe I resolved Fuwa against them. They summoned Secretarion Dragon. They were on a small branded package, and by small branded package, I mean they just ran Cartesia. And instead of using Cartesia as a fusion material, they actually used it for a synchro material, and summoned, let me see, yes, they summoned Buster Dragon using that, which turns all the opponent's monsters into dragons. And if you have never read Secretarion Dragon, essentially while they control it, the opponent can't activate the effects of special summon dragon or spellcaster monsters that they control. So basically, Buster Dragon made Secretarion Dragon live by turning all my monsters into dragons, and I unfortunately didn't draw any form of out for that. So I did end up losing the duel. You know, the one time that I wish I actually had my droplet in the deck, but I don't think that that is going to be a common strategy. I think the most common thing that people are going to try to do when they do that sort of thing is the window play. But again, as long as we can set up a way to just not allow that to resolve, I think it's just going to be very beneficial in the long run. So yeah, I think the best hand traps are going to be Ash Blossom, Ghost Bell, the Dominus Impulse. And in terms of the available tools that our deck has, I would say the Lunalight Fusion is, again, just going to be the best quote-unquote breaker that we can run. They're going to be sitting on fusions anyway. And then in terms of, like, you know, as long as you can obviously just set up the Laggard answer, I think you'll genuinely be fine. I would say if you do, you know, fear the deck, like, matchup, I would say stuff, if you want to do, like, sideboard options, Dimensional Barrier is always an option. The deck revolves around fusion summoning. You call fusion, GG, game over. You can also run different dimension. Yeah, different dimension ground. Anything that's, you know, sent to the graveyard, any monster sent to the graveyard is banished instead, meaning they don't get any of the advantage of setting up their traps or setting up their spells from the deck, because they have to go to the graveyard to activate their effects. And I know some people do run, like, the Retaliating Sea as another means of doing that, or the Contact Sea. Yeah, Contact Sea, which means that they have to use the Contact Sea as a material. At least in this deck, they do run, like, at this profile, they do run the Cross Sheep to address that. But you know, I think those are options. I just would say that running more generically applicable options are better, rather than like going all in on Draco Tail hate in the side or in the main, just because I don't think the deck will fare too well. I think it is a good deck, but I think it's entirely too fair versus a deck like Lunalight that just has so many pushes, so many, like, strong cards in archetype. I think Lunalight's engine is a very, very competent engine for, like, a high rogue, low tiered deck, however you like to think about it. But yeah, I think with all that said, let's go over one of my own replays to sort of see how you kind of tackle this deck in practice. So this is the replay that I wanted to show off. Do keep in mind that on MD Pro they use the OCG ban list, so it does feature cards that were released for Draco Tail in Doom of Dimensions. So I do have the Fua in rotation. This is game 2 of our series. In this video I was intentionally choosing to go second, just for the content farming. But yeah, he won game 1 because he used the Buster Dragon with the Secretarion Dragon for floodgating me, which, you know, always oh so fun to get floodgated, am I right? Alright, so let's address the state of the board. He does have all 3 traps in rotation, so Horn, Flame, and Sting. He also does have the pop from the Grammel, and he does have the 3 mana in hand for the quick effect fusion summon. Due to the fact that I don't have any real way to address any of the trap cards on the field, he will get a draw each for them. So he will have the chance to draw into more non-engine off of those 3 draws. but I do at least have the Dominus Impulse off of the rip to address the Femina. So I go for a pretty standard start: Gold Leo, send Hound, Hound, summon the Kaleido Chick, try to get the Black Sheep into rotation, but he sees it coming and addresses it with Horn and Grammel to ensure that I don't recover the sheep back into my hand. I then go for the Perfume to resummon, but he hits it off with the Flame. And if you're unaware what Sting does, Sting is a mini soul release. It allows him to target 2 cards in my graveyard and banish them. Luckily for me, I do have the Foolish Barrel Goods to extend, so sending the Perfume to go searching for the wolf. He does droll me, but thankfully I have enough in hand to do what I need to do. Resummon the chick, send the Martin, and essentially at this point I'm trying to see if I can get the Femina answer or response. But I'm also trying to make sure that I have enough damage on field. He does end up drawing the Bestial off of his 3 draws, but I do have the second chick in rotation, so I can send the Leo. He does use the Femina to go for a quick effect fusion into Altherion to return the Leo back to the extra deck, but the Impulse checks it, and at this point it is game over. We negate all we shut down all the battle phase effects, do the pop into the battle phase, and then just run in for lethal. I think again, the deck is very competent and has good tools, but Lunalight just has a bit too many pushes in general. And if I had a better hand with maybe like an Ash, or if my back row removal was drawn, it would have been a much easier time dealing with this. But let's get into the ending of this. Thank you so much for watching. Please do leave a like, subscribe, any comments or suggestions. I hope that the replay was useful to some of you in terms of like applications. I would have done one for the yummy one, but I didn't really think about it at the time. But yeah, we'll do the follow-up with the Canine video as the 3rd part, and then you'll get more gameplay compilations soon enough. But other than that, thank you so much, and see you later. Peace.